This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
A series of shootings in the U.S. state of Georgia leave 8 people dead. Concerns mount over safety of AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccines, but experts insist benefits outweigh the risks. And Algerians sample literary works at a national book event for the first time since the start of the coronavirus pandemic. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program, we'll look at the Director General of the World Trade Organization, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala's week-long tour of Nigeria. And coming up in sport, the new CAF boss Patrice Motsepe says he's not planning to change the African Cup of Nations schedule. We start in Niger, where militants have killed at least 58 people. Authorities say armed men ambushed a convoy and attacked a nearby village. The assault happened on Monday in the Tillaberi region, which is located in Niger's northwest. The region is near the border with Mali and Burkina Faso. It has seen a rise in attacks carried out by Islamic militant groups. At least 100 people were killed in January when militants raided 2 villages. Police have arrested a suspect after a series of deadly shootings in the U.S. state of Georgia. Our reporter Kate Fisher has more from Washington.
These 3 shootings took place within an hour on Tuesday afternoon, 2 in the city of Atlanta and 1 in Cherokee County, just north of the city. Police say that the 2 that took place in Atlanta, they believe the 4 victims there, 2 in one spa and 2 in another across the road from it. They believe they are all Asian women. 21-year-old Robert Aaron Long, who is a resident of Cherokee County. He's currently in police custody. Authorities say that things are still in very early. Their suspect was initially arrested in connection with the one in Cherokee County, but they believe, due to this video evidence, that he is probably linked to all 3, although they haven't made that official yet. They're still trying to determine a motive for these killings, but clearly, given the rise in racially motivated attacks on Asian Americans in recent months, there is a lot of speculation that this has been a racially motivated attack. The police say they're looking at every possible motive, but clearly that's at the top of a lot of people's minds, and it comes just off the back of US President Joe Biden in his televised address to the nation last week, really being quite angry about how upset he was by the rise in attacks on Asian Americans, saying it's wrong, it's un-American, and it must stop.
Authorities say the victims of Tuesday's shooting appear to be of Asian descent. There's been a surge of hate crimes against Asian Americans during the pandemic. CGTN's Timothy Ulrich has more.
The New York Police Department reported that hate crimes motivated by anti-Asian sentiment jumped by 1,900% in New York City in 2020. Stop AAPI Hate, a national coalition formed to address discrimination, received nearly 3,000 reports of hate incidents from Asian Americans last year. 8% of those cases involved physical assault, and women were nearly 2.5 times more likely to be harassed than men.
The Asian American community is really fearful and concerned at this moment from both the racism of last year and then the current spate of violence. We don't know if this year's street crimes were necessarily racially motivated, but the effect is similar. We're being traumatized.
Jiang also pointed to a clear correlation between President Trump's racist rhetoric and the subsequent hate speech spread on social media, resulting in violence against Asian Americans. For his part, President Biden has condemned what he called vicious hate crimes committed against Asian Americans.
At this very moment, so many of them are fellow Americans. They're on the front lines of this pandemic trying to save lives. And still, They're forced to live in fear for their lives just walking down streets in America. It's wrong, it's un-American, and it must stop.
Within his first week in office, President Biden signed a memorandum denouncing discrimination against people of Asian or Pacific Islander descent. It's a clear departure from Trump's rhetoric, but there's still a long way to go before the concerns and fears of Asian Americans are addressed. Timothy Ulrich, CGTN.
China's foreign ministry says they hope they can work with the U.S. on cooperation in order to build a healthy and stable relationship. The foreign ministry has also expressed dissatisfaction after Japanese and American officials issued a statement criticizing Beijing's activity in Hong Kong, Taiwan and Xinjiang, saying it seriously interferes with China's internal affairs. It comes a day before top American and Chinese officials are to meet in Alaska for the first face-to-face high-level talks since U.S. President Joe Biden came into office. Washington is expected to take a tough stance on China, while Beijing has insisted it will take all necessary measures to safeguard its sovereignty and its interests.
China and the U.S. share a common mission in tackling climate change and helping with post-pandemic global economic recovery. The two sides have broad common interests. They should strengthen collaboration on related issues and play a leading role in the international community. China-U.S. cooperation can not only benefit the two countries, but also the world. A confrontation between them would violate the interests of the international community.
The U.S. and China talks will be held in the American city of Anchorage, just below the Arctic Circle. The isolated location may seem like an odd place for a meeting, but CGTN's Nathan King explains why it was chosen.
It's a light dusting, is it?
It is a light dusting.
Former Alaska Governor Bill Walker knows quite a bit about freezing weather.
Oh, you know, from Valdezville, we'll get 4 feet at a time.
4 feet? But like many others here this week, the governor wants to see a thaw in U.S.-China relations after the deep freeze of the last few years.
I'm hopeful from the standpoint, I think that there are some issues that they need to resolve that are well outside the area of trade. And I think they're going to start with that.
The planned meetings here, led by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and China's most senior diplomat and Politburo member Yang Jiechi, are being called a one-off by the White House. Joined by new U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi, this high-level meeting will occur here in Anchorage, roughly halfway between Washington and Beijing. It's a sub-zero scene reflecting where the relationship has been, but Alaska is also an epicenter for issues the two powers need to work on, like climate change and commerce.
China is our largest trade partner. They have been for 13 years, and largely with seafood, oil. The amount of oil that's shipped from Alaska to China has doubled from 2019 to 2020. So we have a lot of Asia is our market.
This meeting on the ice will happen after U.S. officials have met with Asian allies Japan and the Republic of Korea. Bill Walker was governor the last time leading Chinese officials visited the Arctic state. He hosted Xi Jinping and his delegation after they had just held their first summit with then President Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Since then, the U.S.-China relationship has chilled, and while the U.S. criticizes China on human rights from Hong Kong to Xinjiang, U.S. political divisions and violence have tarnished Washington's image abroad. This independent-minded former governor is pushing to change that.
It does have a negative impact, and I'm all about jobs. I'm all about creating infrastructure and developing our resources responsibly. And it's hard to do that if there's too much partisanship associated. The economy should not be a partisan issue. Healthcare, I've always said, should not be a partisan issue. So there are certain things that just should be. You search for the right answer.
While we don't expect all issues to be solved, of course, in just this one meeting, what we're looking for is some sort of cooperation on the big issues like commerce, climate and COVID, rather than the divisions we've seen over the past few years. Nathan King, CGTN, Anchorage, Alaska.
The British Prime Minister has unveiled his Global Britain Initiative with a major focus on the Indo-Pacific region. Boris Johnson intends to redirect his country's foreign policy and defence priorities after Brexit. A government report outlines overhauling the UK's military, paving the way for increasing the number of nuclear warheads. It describes China as an economic threat, But Johnson says the UK will continue pursuing a positive trade and investment relationship with Beijing. The document also refers to Russia as the most acute threat to the security of the UK. Russian officials say the report shows London has no plans to reduce its policies towards Moscow for at least another 10 years. A new unity government has officially taken office in Libya. The new team takes over from two warring administrations in the eastern and western regions, thus completing a smooth transition of power after a decade of violent chaos. Members of the new cabinet were sworn in on Monday. Fayez al-Sarraj, who led the outgoing government of national accord in Tripoli, embraced his successor, Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Dibeiba, after handing over power. Dibeiba's government emerged from talks involving the United Nations and was endorsed by Parliament last week. It is mandated to improve services, unify state institutions and oversee national elections at the end of the year.
Regarding the President and the members of the Presidential Council, we are here on the first day and we took it upon ourselves, God willing, that we, former government of national accord, will not hold on to power. We will move forward with Libya to solve its conflicts and problems. But unfortunately, a reality was imposed upon us, a bitter one, that Libyans have all lived through the war. But once the dialogue led to the emergence of the government of national unity, we were adamant from the beginning that we will transfer power immediately after the House of Representatives gave its approval. We hope they will succeed in all their duties.
The Ethiopian government has just announced that 4.2 million people in the war-ravaged Tigray region have received food and related humanitarian aid. According to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, almost all of the 6 million people in Tigray need support daily. The ministry said food rations are being delivered to rural areas and most towns. Here's CGTN's Girum Chala with more on that report.
After what the government called a law enforcement mission was concluded about 2 months back, the humanitarian situation in Tigray remained to be worrying for many. Now, Ethiopia says about 4.2 million of its citizens in the north are being provided with food and related aid.
Food and food-related aid has been delivered to 4.2 million citizens in Tigray. We announced that the first round of that work is completed and we are now staging a feasibility study to soon begin the second round. To avoid any suffering of our citizens, we, as much as we can, are working to keep this relief service going and to keep the momentum too.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs further said Ethiopia has already opened the much-requested humanitarian corridors in the region, but said the global community's contribution so far is only 30%. 70% of humanitarian services are being provided by Ethiopia itself. Still, Ethiopia is facing pressure from the U.S. and the European Union.
They said there are human rights abuses. They claimed women are being raped and people are being murdered and looted. We said, well, come and let us independently verify what you are saying. We told them we are willing to support that process. They said the humanitarian service must be strengthened, and we agreed with that. It is us providing 70% of the aid, so we have met all their conditions. After this, whatever they talk about slamming sanctions and whatnots, it is simply an empty song for us.
On the other hand, unverified reports suggest TPLF forces stage small attacks here and there. Their leadership even sometimes claims the capture of small towns. Ethiopian authorities, however, say TPLF is no force to worry about. The focus now is on the rehabilitation and reconstruction of Tigray. Group Chala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. Concerns mount over the safety of AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccines, but experts insist the benefits outweigh the risks. And Algerians sample literary works at a national book event for the first time since the start of the coronavirus pandemic.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Europe's drug regulator is standing by the AstraZeneca vaccine, saying there is no indication it causes blood clots. Still, the agency is reviewing the shot after at least a dozen EU countries put the vaccine on hold. Tony Waterman has more from Brussels.
It's the second time in as many days that the European drugs regulator has publicly backed the AstraZeneca vaccine. The agency chief, Emir Cook, said she is still firmly convinced that the benefits of the vaccine outweighed the risk, noting that COVID-19 is killing thousands of people every single day across Europe. That's compared to a very small group of about 40 people out of 17 million who have experienced serious health complications like clotting and bleeding after receiving the vaccine. Now, since last week, a team of experts has been poring over reams and reams of safety data, trying to figure out if this is a causal relationship, so whether the vaccine caused the clotting, or if it's a mere coincidence that the clots were in fact caused by something entirely unrelated. And as of now, the agency says there appears to be no direct link.
I want to also stress that at present, there is no indication that vaccination has caused these conditions. They have not come up in the clinical trials, and they're not listed as known or expected side events with this vaccine. The number of thromboembolic events overall in the vaccinated people seems not to be higher than that seen in the general population.
Cook also said that the theory that perhaps a specific batch of the vaccine was causing these adverse events was unlikely because cases of clotting have been linked to multiple batches of the vaccine. Now, the EMA is going to release the results of its investigation on Thursday. In the meantime, the number of countries suspending the shot's use continues to grow. Sweden and Latvia on Tuesday joined the likes of Germany, France, Spain, and Italy, and many of them saying that this is just a precautionary measure as they await fresh guidance from the EMA, but there are concerns that this pause in the rollout of the jab could do lasting damage to the bloc's immunization program, which has been plagued by problems from the very beginning. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Brussels.
The World Health Organization is investigating the reports of blood clots, but is urging countries not to stop using the vaccine. The coronavirus has already killed more than 2.7 million people worldwide.
There is no documented death that's been linked to a COVID vaccine. So I think that while we need to continue to be very closely monitoring this, we do not want people to panic, and we would, for the time being, recommend that countries continue vaccinating with AstraZeneca, but we will have more updates tomorrow or at any time when there is a change in this recommendation.
The Democratic Republic of Congo has spent considerable time and effort countering rumors and misinformation about COVID-19 vaccines since last year. But a few weeks after receiving doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine, the country postponed its vaccination campaign over the blood clots reported in Europe. And as CGTN's Chris Ochamringa tells us, the postponement has been welcomed by many Congolese citizens.
Health workers educate locals in the DRC's eastern town of Beni about the importance of Ebola vaccines. Misinformation about the vaccines and the mistrust of workers were some of the biggest challenges they faced during an Ebola outbreak in 2018. The officials had to work closely with leaders in the host communities to dispel the misinformation, and they are now using the same strategy to counter rumors about COVID-19 vaccines.
We are working with community leaders, village chiefs and opinion leaders to spread the word about the safety and efficacy of COVID-19 vaccines. That's the same strategy we used during the Ebola outbreak in 2018. It worked back then, and we believe it will work this time round.
The government received 1.7 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine earlier this month under the COVAX program. The arrival of the vaccines sparked optimism among health officials about curbing the spread of COVID-19.
According to the study that we are conducting, people are becoming more and more receptive about this vaccine.
But the government postponed its vaccination campaign last week following reports about blood clots by people who were vaccinated in several European countries. And that has increased vaccine skepticism across the capital, Kinshasa.
The Minister of Health said they'll carry out more investigations about the AstraZeneca vaccine in order to protect us from negative side effects that clearly shows that the vaccines are unsafe.
God didn't approve the use of the vaccines in our country. That's why he allowed that confusion about the blood clots to happen. Many of us would have died if the vaccines were administered.
Health experts from the World Health Organization, however, say the AstraZeneca vaccine is safe and have dismissed any link between the jab and the formation of blood clots. The DRC Health Ministry says a new date for the country's vaccination campaign will be announced after health experts release results of national and international investigations about the AstraZeneca vaccine. Chris Sachamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Elsewhere, Somalia has kicked off its COVID-19 immunization campaign. While officials are trying to bolster public confidence in COVID-19 vaccines, some remain hesitant. Ashtatal has more.
After receiving 300 doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine, Somalia has launched its immunization campaign. The country accessed the doses through the COVAX initiative. The country's health minister is among the first to receive the initial dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine.
I don't feel anything particular. I'm okay, and I hope it will go like this. Well, there are immunization programs going on in all over Somalia. Yes, some areas are not accessible. Our duty is to try to convince people to come and seek these services.
While officials are trying to bolster confidence, some are wary of taking the AstraZeneca vaccine.
The EU that produced the vaccines has stopped using it. Among them, France. We cannot simply trust it.
Somalia's health ministry, in the meantime, continues to urge the public to embrace COVID-19 vaccines. Astatal, CGTN.
The Egyptian government says it has signed contracts for the delivery of 120 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines to the country. It is getting 40 million doses from China's Sinopharm. Most of the remaining doses will be those of the Oxford AstraZeneca jab, half of which will be from the COVAX initiative for fair vaccine distribution. The country has already started inoculating medical staff. Here's Adel Makhroui with more details.
Cairo has signed contracts to get COVID-19 vaccines for 60 million citizens, but just 100,000 doses have arrived. That's enough for only 75,000 people. Two-thirds of the vaccines available are from China.
Egypt is facing difficulties in receiving its batches. This is due to limitations in the production capacity of pharmaceutical companies. They haven't been able to commit to their contracts to deliver COVID-19 vaccines.
Egypt opened an online registration platform for citizens interested in getting the vaccine. Yet after 10,000 applied, the government shut down the service and postponed announcing its vaccination schedule. Egyptian medical teams treating COVID-19 patients have been getting vaccination priority. So far, only 3,000 healthcare workers have received the jab.
More than 360 hospitals are getting the vaccine. Senior citizens who have chronic diseases come next in line after doctors. Then people with chronic disease, like heart and kidney conditions. Those who are considered to be high risk, they could get vaccinated within weeks or months. It depends on when the vaccine producers are going to send their shipments.
Egypt was the first African country to receive the Chinese vaccine from Sinopharm. Doctors say vaccines like Sinopharm's are better suited for countries like Egypt. That's because they can be stored and transported at regular refrigerator temperatures.
Pfizer and Moderna are two vaccines I believe are very difficult to be administered in Egypt. They need certain temperatures. Pfizer needs 70, Moderna 20. This makes the process of cooling them very difficult in developing countries, especially that the vaccines are not going to be only in big cities. They're supposed to be available all over Egypt.
I prefer the Chinese vaccine because it is made in the traditional way that we are all used to and understand very well. It is an inactivated coronavirus. Some of the new vaccines have modifications. They rely on the messenger RNA or viral vector. To me, I prefer waiting for some time until we have long-term research data available.
Egypt is expecting to receive some 5 million COVID-19 vaccines in March. Among them, a gift of 300,000 jabs from the Chinese government, which Beijing is offering to help Cairo in its struggle to acquire COVID-19 vaccines. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Zimbabwe has received a second batch of COVID-19 vaccines from China. President Emerson Mnangagwa received the consignment at the Robert Mugabe International Airport on Tuesday. CGTN's Farai Mwakutuya reports from Harare.
1 month after receiving its first consignment of COVID-19 vaccines, Zimbabwe took delivery of donated Sinopharm doses and its first batch of purchased Sinovac vials.
The two consignments, which are now, Your Excellency, totaling the 400,000 doses, have made a great change in terms of health to our people. We now have two vaccines, the Sinopharm, which is the donated vaccine from the People's Republic of China, and the Sinovac, of which we will be procuring 2 million doses.
Zimbabwe is the first African country to receive a second donation of vaccines from China.
That's because China and Zimbabwe enjoy the time-honored friendship, and Zimbabwe need the vaccine support. And China and Zimbabwe always support each other.
Zimbabwe's leader hailed China for ensuring equitable access to vaccines.
The People's Republic of China's unparalleled readiness to avail access to the vaccines for commercial procurement testifies to our shared and mutual desire to continue enhancing cooperation, particularly in these times of distress and competition for resources.
The Zimbabwean government says it has set aside $100 million to procure enough vaccines to inoculate 60% of its population. The arrival of these doses will enable Zimbabwe to expand its vaccination drive beyond just frontline workers to include most notably school teachers. The 2020 academic calendar, which had been on hold for 2 months, began on March 15th for exam students. All other learners will return to class on March 22nd as the country continues easing restrictions after a reduction in new infections that had spiked during the festive season. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
A year into the battle against COVID-19, the African continent has smashed through a grim barrier. 4 million cases have been registered in the region and close to 40,000 new infections reported in the last week alone. Over 100,000 people have died from the virus that has wreaked havoc with livelihoods and health systems around the world. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
Africa's first COVID-19 case was reported in Egypt February last year. The caseload has since climbed to over 4 million, and the continent continues to count its dead.
We don't have a good idea really of the true burden of disease in many African countries. And it's going to be many years until we really understand the impact of the epidemic in many countries. We've seen a lot of innovation. We've seen a lot of impressive programs, and we've seen that what's been learned from other epidemics, such as Ebola, has been applied to this epidemic.
The continent is slowly emerging from a second wave sparked by the N501Y.V2 variant, which first appeared in South Africa. The rapid spread caught countries off guard and placed under-resourced health facilities under immense strain.
We really need to understand how important it is for everyone still to contribute to slowing the spread of the virus. As we go into these periods of kind of lower level transmission, people get reassured, but this virus is still dangerous and it's still spreading in the population.
South Africa has helped ramp up testing and monitoring capabilities to detect new variants and possible resurgence of the virus.
When you have uncontrolled spread of the virus, coupled with some kind of seroprevalence from a previous wave, you are creating an environment where immune escape is going to be selected for. As soon as you identify, hang on, there's another variant with even further mutations, you can contain it. If you're not checking what's going on in terms of this virus, then by the time it's already spread, it's too late.
The arrival of 14.6 million vaccine doses, although slow, has helped boost the continent's response and are mainly being administered to frontline healthcare workers.
We should be aiming for 100% so that it's clear to people that we want everyone to take up the vaccine. At least we've got some of the healthcare workers protected, and that will help us to deal with the challenge of a resurgence. We all want to move quickly now and transition to getting the vaccines into other members of the population that are at high risk of severe disease.
The African continent is not in this battle alone. Countries such as Brazil, the UK, the US are also struggling to get a grip on new mutations. But scientists have warned Africa to keep up its guard as fatigue sets in and more movement is allowed around the continent. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Let's now take a look at your sports business news. I beg your pardon. Here's what's ahead. We'll take a look at the Director General of the World Trade Organization, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala's week-long tour of Nigeria.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The newly appointed Director General of the World Trade Organization, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, is in Nigeria. She's on a week-long tour that is aimed at enhancing trade, supporting entrepreneurs and improving the economy. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam has the details.
The new Director General of the World Trade Organization, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, in an interactive session with Nigeria's Foreign Affairs Minister, Geoffrey Onyema. Discussions are aimed at enhancing trade and improving the Nigerian economy. Among other issues, Okonjo-Iweala wants to upscale women having equal opportunity in the export market.
A part of the organization called the International Trade Center that has the capacity to train
women entrepreneurs and help them access international international markets, working with the Nigeria Export Promotion. And we've already started that with people who are processing shea butter and sesame seeds, where Nigeria is quite one of the world's largest producers.
Nigeria's economy has been facing a myriad of challenges and barely staggered out of recession in the fourth quarter of last year. Africa's topmost economy is struggling to contain rising inflation, and the local currency, the naira, has been depreciating against the dollar. Foreign direct investment has also dropped. But the WTO boss says Nigeria stands to benefit from the opportunities offered by the implementation of the continent's free trade area agreement.
You know, there's a huge demand for Nigeria's products, African wear and the fashion that we are so good at. And yet we've not yet really crystallized that industry in such a way we can export to the rest of Africa. So with this African Continental Free Trade Area, we'll be working with women and men in that industry.
We owe a great debt of gratitude to you, Director General, for all that you have done, not just for Nigeria, but for the global community. And we're absolutely delighted that you still have the ambition, you still have the energy and the drive and the commitment to continue doing and to continue giving.
This is Okonjo-Iweala's first visit to Nigeria since becoming Director General of the World Trade Organization. She's the first woman and first African to lead the international body and will be serving for the next 4 years. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Manufacturing in South Africa took a massive downturn in 2020 due to COVID-19. In January, the sector recorded a 3.4% decline compared to the same period last year. However, with eased lockdown restrictions, there's been a marked increase in activity. CGTN Sumitra Naidu reports.
It's been a slow start to 2021, but manufacturing is rebounding. According to the APSA Purchasing Managers Index released earlier this month, factory activity jumped to a 4-month high, although it came off a low base.
So the sector contracted by about 17% all in all. However, the subsectors within manufacturing were affected differently. Clothing and footwear it declined during the year by about 21%. And clothing and footwear is a very important subsector because it contributes about 1.2 percentage points to the overall GDP of South Africa.
Manufacturing is the 4th largest industry in South Africa, contributing 14% to GDP. Over 1.1 million people are employed in the sector, making it essential to the economy. But the lockdowns kept factories closed for longer, causing a lag in activity. A 13.9% decline was recorded in petroleum and chemical products, as well as rubber and plastic. The liquor bans also had an impact.
Now, if you look at the subsectors, a big drag on growth was petroleum. Now, we know South Africa only has a handful of refineries, and some of them are closed. Another sector which saw a very sharp decline in January was beverages, which we know alcoholic beverages sales were prohibited in January. On the positive side, in January, we saw the transport sector doing really well. So that's vehicles and things like that. So let's hope that momentum is sustained.
Experts say one of the challenges the manufacturing industry could still be facing is the free movement of products and services.
I think what is interesting at the moment is that we're picking up quite a lot of concerns about supply chain issues. Respondents are telling us that they're not getting the goods they need to produce. So that could be due to import issues, there's steel shortages. So even if demand picks up, then production might be hampered because we don't have the supplies that we need to ramp up production.
At the moment, we still do not have a fully functioning airport. A lot of cargo that goes through the airport. This means is that there's actually a lot of inventory being built up in the country.
The manufacturing sector still has to deal with load shedding, which could delay a proper recovery. Fuel prices are also expected to increase, and this is likely to impact production. But motor manufacturing, which accounts for a large chunk of the overall sector, is in full swing and will help with the rebound. Samit Fernando, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, the MTN Group has reported a strong set of operational and financial results for 2020. It added 29 million subscribers in the year to reach a total of 280 million across 21 markets. CGTN's Angelo Coppola has more.
MTN reported a 52% increase in adjusted headline earnings per share, a 4 percentage point increase in return on equity to 17%, and a more than doubling in operating cash flow to 28.3 billion rand.
I think what we also saw was significant growth in data in terms of how people are now consuming data with lockdowns and those sort of things in place. So we had a 31% increase in data and almost a 110% increase in traffic that drove that.
At the same time, the company also announced the suspension of their dividend. This follows the announcement of a dividend suspension at their interim results presentation earlier in the year. There were 3 issues raised: COVID uncertainty, the lack of progress on the asset realization program, and currency issues in Nigeria,
where we upstreamed about 286 million rand, and we still have, of the 2019 and 2020 dividends, about 4.2 billion rand of liquidity stuck in the country, and that's due to the foreign currency shortages in Nigeria.
The company says it was important to provide some certainty around the dividend. That's after also suspending the current dividend policy.
So we will be putting out a new policy in 2022. And the last item was, obviously, to create some certainty. We said we're going to declare dividend. We guided that, obviously, based on solvency and liquidity and board approval, we issued guidance that 2021 dividend will be a minimum ordinary dividend of 260 cents.
Shareholders will be happy with the MTN results, but not so happy that they won't be getting a dividend this time round. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Tunisia has warned that crop production there could decrease this year amid fears of a second consecutive drought to hit parts of North Africa. Agriculture contributes about 10% of Tunisia's economic output, and there's concern that falling harvests could pile pressure on the economy that's reeling from the COVID-19 crisis. Adnan Chauchi reports.
Tunisia's acting agriculture, hydraulic resources and fisheries minister has declared that the country's agricultural sector is facing several challenges. This includes rain deficit and scarcity of water resources, which could have a negative impact on crop harvest this season.
Water is the biggest challenge for Tunisia and for the Ministry of Agriculture this year and in the next decade. Water is a real problem because of low rainfall, which is caused by climate change and global warming. Due to irregular rainfall and drought, production could be harmed. The crop harvest is really threatened.
Members of the Parliamentary Agriculture Commission revealed that the stocks of Tunisia's dams dropped by about 239 million cubic meters this month. The filling rate of dams stood at only 51%. Experts have warned that there are many structural problems affecting water resources and agriculture in the North African state.
Even when the rainfall is high in some regions of the country, the infrastructure is weak. Dams are either too old and need to be modernized or completely rehabilitated. This year, the lack of water in dams has hit new records. Agriculture is a pillar of the national economy. Water scarcity causes a bad crop year, and it means more economic difficulties.
Tunisia's grains harvest fell 35% in 2020, mostly due to a long dry spell. Authorities have said that the agricultural sector was hit by high debt following a bad rainfall in harvest season. Loans granted for agriculture makes it the second most indebted sector after tourism.
Drought has catastrophic consequences on farmers. We don't have money to pay our debts, and banks are refusing to give loans to farmers because the crop harvest is uncertain.
As part of its annual dam water exploitation plan, the Agricultural Department plans to devote about 64% of the dam's resources to drinking water needs and 36% to irrigation. Experts at the Ministry of Agriculture, Hydraulic Resources and Fisheries assert that water scarcity and drought require the adoption of the quota system and the orientation of the water of some dams. The Union of Agriculture has urged the government to support thousands of farmers during this crisis. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And we still have more news for you here in the program. Here's what's ahead. Algerians sample literary works at a national book event for the first time since the start of the coronavirus pandemic.
Nature is essential for humans to exist, from pollinating our crops to stabilizing our climate. But our natural world is under serious threat. Humanity's influence on the decline of nature is so great that around 1 million species already face extinction. One continent, Africa, is trying to halt the trend. There are some special people doing some incredible work on the ground to help conserve the continent's fauna, flora, and cultural heritage, whilst introducing these riches to the rest of the world.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
On to North Africa now. In Algeria, the National Book Fair has been taking place in the capital, Algiers. This is after a whole year's break due to the COVID-19 pandemic. At the launch, the Cultural Minister, Malika Bendouda, promised to reduce book prices to help improve the reading culture in the North African country. CGTN's Wanja Mungai has more details.
Book lovers in Algiers are delighting in this opportunity to sample what local publishers have to offer. It's the first time the National Book Fair is taking place here since the coronavirus pandemic struck. At the launch ceremony last week, the Culture Minister promised to support the industry players and readers.
I'm very happy that the book fair has returned to the public after its absence due to the coronavirus pandemic. There is a plan to hold many other exhibitions, as well as to work to reduce the price of books, because in the past we failed in providing books to readers.
There is an abundance of books despite the absence of international publishing houses. I found the books I was looking for, but the audience's turnout remains modest.
Some say the reading culture in the North African country has been on a steady decline. With this knowledge, some publishers have opted to offer easier methods of consuming literary works, including electronic book readers like this one.
As a publishing house, we prefer to mix between electronic and paper in order to urge Algerians to read. This e-reader can read any page of this Quran with different voices and with interpretation, which helps learning, and the price of the product we are marketing here does not exceed $15.
Such digital innovations are helping to improve the user experience and could hopefully boost the reading culture among Algerians. The event is on till the 20th of March and aims to host 24 literature conferences and workshops by then. Wanja Mungai, CGTN.
In China's southwestern Guizhou province, an artist from the Miao ethnic group has converted a traditional craft using tie-dye into a thriving industry and winning over fans from far and wide.
In Danjai County, China's southwestern province of Guizhou, the Paimo village has been a centuries-old production center of the batik and tie-dyed fabrics. Over the past decade, the bold-colored local textile products have gained a wider market thanks to Zhang Xiu, an innovative practitioner of the ancient crafts.
As the General Secretary said, it's the distinctive local color that wins the recognition of the wider world. Our tie-dye products have been so popular in our home province, in other parts of China, and in overseas markets. Before the Spring Festival in February, we got a lot of orders from abroad. Now we are busy working to fill the demand.
Zhang is a designated inheritor of intangible cultural heritage. With support from the local cultural authorities, she also runs regular training sessions for the villagers and visitors.
I managed to find Ms. Zhang's contact on the internet and then traveled here. I'm a fan of traditional fabric making and textile art. Nowadays, such techniques and crafts have not got enough attention from the younger generations. I want to do my part in preserving the tradition. I'm a design student. I'm going to explore tie-dye's appeal to young people in my graduation project. I'm sure ethnic tie-dye will be more popular.
At her workshops, Zhang has successfully merged batik and tie-dyed fabric making with distinct embroideries of the Miao ethnic group. Its products range from bags, teacup cozies, pillow sleeves, to various accessories. Greg Lafredi, CGTN.
Well, let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead.